Charles III is the first post-colonial monarch. Although his mother saw the end of the British Empire, she began her reign with the empire, and much of it was still under British rule until the 1970s. Charles, in contrast, will begin with the Commonwealth. For decades, Charles represented the UK in ceremonies to end British rule or a significant tie to the UK. For example, he acted for the Queen at Fiji's independence ceremony in 1970. More recently, he attended the transformation of Barbados from his mother's monarchy to a republic in 2021. However, he's running out of colonies in which to lower the British flag. He might also be running out of monarchies that keep him as king. Some are thinking of becoming republics. So, what role can Charles have in a commonwealth that still wants ties to the UK, but not necessarily its king? To answer that question, let's look at what the Commonwealth is. It's an international association of 56 sovereign states, most of which have historic connections to the British Empire that formed in the 19th century. It attempts to promote democracy, the rule of law, gender equality, sustainability, and human rights. It hasn't been entirely successful in such matters in all its member states, but at least many of them work towards these values. We Toronto members of the Royal Commonwealth Society tend to overlap with the monarchists, so we tend to think that the Commonwealth's most important feature is its head, who coincidentally is the king. But Charles has no constitutional role in most of the Commonwealth. Only 15 of its 56 countries have him as head of state. The rest have either presidents or their own monarchs. Yet the Commonwealth countries have agreed to have him succeed his mother as head of the organization. The Commonwealth is also extremely diverse in ethnic and religious groups, and this is where the organization and its countries get complicated. Africans, Asians, South Americans, and indigenous peoples are the majority of the people of the Commonwealth. People of European descent are the minority. However, for over a century, they were the minority who ruled over the majority in the empire. There's one inescapable fact of history. Every ethnic group from outside the British Isles was either conquered, enslaved, or forcibly transported to another continent by the British at one time or another. By the way, this isn't just a non-white or people of color experience. The tour guides at the General Post Office in Dublin Castle certainly aren't fond of the British either. This is a painting of the Amritsar massacre. It's still a traumatic incident in India. Some people say the British Empire was evil due to its conquest, slavery, racism, and exploitation of colonial peoples. And these people are not wrong. This is Singapore in 1890. By all accounts, Singapore is a success story. Some people say the British Empire was good because it brought industrial and economic development, education, intercultural cooperation, and democracy to people around the world. They point at the many colonial families and individuals who prospered under the empire. And these people are not wrong either. All empires leave a complicated legacy, and Britain's was no exception. In some countries, the people were eager to remove signs of British rule. For example, renaming Salisbury, Rhodesia to Harare, Zimbabwe. But those same people often cling to other things they've inherited from Britain, like Westminster-style democracy, British-style educational systems, and Harry Styles. For example, here are Geetha Hariharan from India and the late Amos Tutuola from Nigeria. They are two of the Commonwealth's most applauded authors. Both grew up in state and countries where English is not the native language. Both lived in countries with thriving publishing industries in local languages. But both wrote all their stories and novels in English. Like many people around the world, they saw beauty in the literature and language of Britain. Empires create complicated identities. Take a look at this poster from World War II. It's a stark contrast with World War I posters, which emphasize white leaders such as Lord Kitchener as defenders of the empire. This poster promotes the idea of different nationalities working together under the Union flag. It also raises the question on the identities of the soldiers. Are they British? Or are they Indian, West African, South African, New Zealander, Canadian, and Australian? Or are they all of these nationalities and British as well? You can see the empire beginning to evolve into the Commonwealth in this poster. Its peoples are changing from rulers and subjects to partners and allies. The evolution of national identity is complex in the Commonwealth. Take my own family's experience as an example. People often perceive me as only Chinese, which is unfortunate because neither my mother's nor father's families had lived in Chinese territory since the 19th century. My mother came from one British colony, Malaya. My father came from another British colony, Hong Kong, and they met in a third British colony, New Brunswick. They've both read King Sullivan's Mines, but have never read any Chinese classical literature. My family's experience is comparable to those of many families in the UK and throughout the Commonwealth. And since countries are composed of people, these experiences shape how Commonwealth countries view each other. Fortunately, Charles knows about these complex issues and has dealt with them at home. Charles, as Prince of Wales, was the most outspoken member of the royal family on treating the diverse ethnic and religious groups of the UK equally as Britons, not as perpetual foreigners. At a time when many Westerners are suspicious of Muslims, Charles has shown a great interest in learning about Islam, not as a security threat, but as a religion of his fellow Britons. Charles has read the Quran and signs letters to Muslim leaders in Arabic. He is also patron of the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies and spoken on several different topics there. In 1993, he said, "If there is much misunderstanding in the West about the nature of Islam, there is also much ignorance about the debt our own culture and civilization owe to the Islamic world. It is a failure which stems, I think, from the straitjacket of history which we have inherited." Charles is also an outspoken supporter of the UK's Black population. In 2022, Charles guest edited an issue of The Voice, the UK's only newspaper for the Black community. Charles founded the Prince's Trust, which helps disadvantaged young people. He used his own money, his Royal Navy severance pay of £7,400, to start the charity. He said that a lot of people were skeptical that it would succeed, but he persisted anyway. The Prince's Trust has helped many young disadvantaged Black people turn their lives around. Idris Elba says a £1,500 grant to study acting from the Prince's Trust enabled him to escape from a life of poverty and being bullied by gangs. Now he's one of Britain's most famous movie stars. In 2020, the Prince's Trust started the Black Pound Project, a campaign to encourage people to shop at Black-owned businesses. How many of you knew about the Black Pound Project before today? That's okay if you didn't. Apparently, Harry and Meghan and Oprah Winfrey didn't know either. Charles has always promoted the idea of a multicultural, multi-faith Britain. He has said that he not only wants to be defender of the faith, but also the defender of faith, of everyone's faith. In a speech to British religious leaders on September 16, 2022, he said, "I have always thought of Britain as a community of communities. It is the duty to protect the diversity of our country, including by protecting the space for faith itself and its practice through the religions, cultures, traditions, and beliefs to which our hearts and minds direct us as individuals. We can see that Charles wants to promote positive change in multicultural and multi-faith issues in the UK. He can do so in the Commonwealth too, assuming his 15 prime ministers let him. Here are some issues where Charles could influence the Commonwealth. Intra-Commonwealth conflicts. India and Pakistan are still perpetual rivals, and now both have nuclear weapons. India and Pakistan aren't the only examples of Commonwealth countries fighting each other. Zimbabwe and Namibia fought against Uganda when they supported opposite sides of the Congolese Civil War of 1996. Charles has worked to resolve ethnic conflicts at home. Can he help resolve them between Commonwealth countries? Internal ethnic rivalries. One of the effects of the British Empire was the migration of peoples around the world, and many Commonwealth countries are multi-ethnic as a result. But after independence, rivalries emerged as some groups who viewed themselves as victims under British rule attacked groups they perceived as allies of the British. Remember when Idi Amin expelled the South Asians from Uganda? Such rivalries continue in several Commonwealth countries, for example, Nigeria and Australia. Our own country is no exception. We have our own ethnic struggles. And like Australia, Canada has a sad history with its Indigenous peoples. Our governor generals and lieutenant governors have urged respect and tolerance within our multicultural society. Could Charles also influence us to do better, as he did in the UK? Climate change. I haven't mentioned Charles' interest in the environment because it's already very well known to the public. What isn't so well known is that the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that 5 countries are at risk of sinking to the ocean due to climate change. 4 out of those 5 countries are Commonwealth states. When they become uninhabitable, which will likely happen in this century, their people will become 600,000 stateless refugees. Can Charles urge the Commonwealth to find some way to help these countries? I hope he does. We know that Charles has a keen interest in the UK's multicultural and environmental issues. These same issues exist between and within Commonwealth countries. When he was Prince of Wales, if left on his own, he took action. Let's hope that his prime ministers let him be the social influencer that he has always wanted to be. Despite his age, Charles represents the interests of a new generation that needs a post-colonial monarch.